A little bit about my background. I think the first photograph that I can remember taking is when I was 9 years old, and I used a 126 Instamatic with black and white film, and I took pictures of the Beatles when they performed at on the Ed Sullivan Show. And it was amazing how good they came out. And about a week later, when I got them back from the developer, I took them into I think I was in 4th grade or something. And it was an instant hit, and I was a hero, and I was hooked for life on photography. And so fast forward about 10 years, and I was in college, and I was a visual arts major. And I tried filmmaking, I tried drawing, I tried a lot of different things, sketching. But when I took my first photography class, which was kind of boring, really, I was just captivated. And it was like the history of photography, you know, and we were watching videos and slide presentations about how photography came into being and all these old photographers and that kind of thing. But I was still hooked, and then, so I did everything I could do in photography in college. And my last year, I did independent study, which I had to apply for and get. But I did independent study where I worked with a professor, and I developed a theme, and I had to illustrate that theme and then present my work at the end of the year. And I loved it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the darkroom. I practically lived in the darkroom. After I graduated, I became a teacher's aide for 1 semester, and just so I could just continue to be around school and photography. And after I got married, about a year later or so, a couple years later actually, we moved to Oregon, and within a year after we were married, I had the opportunity to open up a studio with my best friend, and who was a photographer, had been like doing a lot of freelance work, but he had been in National Geographic, and he didn't have any money, but we had a dream. And the studio that we opened, where we did typical portraiture and weddings, kind of morphed into camera stores. And we ended up opening 1 first, and then we opened up 3 more. We had 4 camera stores, and then we opened up a wholesale business where we serviced professional accounts, professional photographers across the nation, and schools and colleges and newspapers. And so we got to meet these incredible people. Later on in my talk, I'm going to talk about one photographer who's a landscape photographer, David Minch, and he actually used to be one of our customers. And so we got to meet all these incredible people. We got to do all these incredible things. And just a couple of the things that I got to do through my association with other professional photographers. I got to photograph Trailblazer basketball games on the floor, sit down underneath the basket during the Bill Walton days, and got to meet some of those players and sit right underneath the basket and, you know, be one of those guys that gets crashed on when they fall down underneath the basket. I got to do that twice. But the pinnacle of what I got to do came in 1980. We had press clearances to photograph Mount St. Helens. The event leading up to the eruption of Mount St. Helens was going on for several months. They knew it was going to go, they just didn't know when. And so we had press clearances and press passes to get right in, and one of my good friends, who was also a customer of ours, had his own plane. So we worked all this out ahead of time, and we heard on the radio that it had erupted. And I closed the store. We went right down to the airport. We were in the air within 5 minutes. And we were on Mount St. Helens within 15 minutes. We were only 15 minutes away by air. And my pictures were in the local newspaper, which I have still. My wife, probably 10 years ago, assembled all of these things that in a great big scrapbook, and that was one of them. But we were all shooting so many cameras. We had cameras loaded with film, of course, and we had medium format cameras. We had 35mm cameras, and they were all just rolling around on the floor of the plane. And we were so much adrenaline, so much testosterone going, and we were just so amped up about everything. And there were planes flying above us and below us. we were just all shooting each other's cameras. The film that came out of my camera, I know, was those pictures. I don't know that I took them, actually. I think I did. But the pilot, the film that came out of his camera was on the cover of Newsweek that week. So he put it right on the wire services. Back then there used to be wire services before digital, and he was on the cover of Newsweek. Although we don't know that he actually took the picture. It might have been my picture, we don't know. Well, I'm not going to take the credit for it, but I don't know what I did with my glasses. Oh. That's what happens when you get old. Okay, so none of that is what I want to talk to you about, though. Although partially it is, because I want to talk to you about what it was like back in the days of film. You know, and probably some of you people in the room maybe have never shot film. Has everybody shot film in the room? Pretty much everybody. Okay. Does anybody still shoot film? A little bit, every once in a while. But learning the craft of photography taught me to be a good photographer and taught me to see in photographs, to see in pictures. So it's a blessing and a curse, kind of, because I'll be going down the road and I'll see a picture. I have to stop, I have to turn around, I have to go back, somebody with me, they have to be patient while I, you know, take the shot. But I can't resist. You know, it's one of those things. I see in pictures. I see photographically. So I see what the frame would look like, how I could frame that picture, what the picture should be and what it is. And you know, back when we had film, of course, you couldn't see, obviously you couldn't see the picture as you took it. You just had to wait until you could either go in the darkroom yourself or send it off to a processor and wait a couple of days. Or this was even before 1 hour labs where you couldn't even get your film in an hour. You had to wait a week or 3 or 4 days at least to get your film back. And then you never knew whether you had anything until you got your film back. Half the time we would shoot a whole roll of film and get maybe 1 or 2 pictures that were worth even printing or looking at or even saving. And I have boxes and boxes of those old pictures. You know, I just looked today, I have over 4,000 pictures on my iPhone. You know, so it's incredible what we have today versus what we didn't, you know, what we didn't have back in the day. So, but what I want to talk to you about is how it is that we develop our eye, develop the art of seeing, seeing photographically, and learning the craft and seeing in pictures. First, I think the first point I want to make is that you should know and learn the basics of exposure, depth of field, things that we use as photographers' lingo, so to speak. But you should learn the basics, because nowadays, and I'm the same way, and I'm not saying this in any kind of critical way, but I shoot my cameras on automatic almost all the time, you know? And back when I was in college, there was not even autofocus. And we had to go out and specifically buy manual cameras. And we had to buy a light meter. And we had to take, you know, independent light readings even if our camera had built-in meter. And we used view cameras where we had to use an external light meter. And you know, I just saw something on, I think it was CBS this morning on Sundays. And there was this guy that photographed in a big, like he had a, I think it was an 18 by 24 view camera. It weighed 70 pounds. And he would go and he would set this camera up and he would take the shot and he would take one shot, you know, and then somebody wheeled up right behind him and got out of the car and took a quick picture and got out and go back in the car, you know. That's what it's like today versus what it used to be like, okay? Just as a kind of comparison. So learn and know the craft a little bit and learn to see in pictures. And first you need to know the basics. We had to learn on manual cameras. We had to know what f-stops and shutter speeds were all about and how they corresponded to each other and what each function of exposure did. In other words, if you wanted just to take a picture of a portrait or a portrait of someone and you wanted to just focus on their eyes and you wanted a very shallow depth of field to where it just went to blur, which is common. That's a lot of pictures are taken that way, portraiture. You know that a wide aperture or wide open aperture gives you a very shallow depth of field. Well, a lot of people, I mean, photographing on automatic cameras, don't know even the basics of that kind of thing. The benefit is that you know how things work. You know the intricacies of how things work. And sometimes you'll come up with situations where you have to turn your automatic camera off and you have to go over to manual settings, and you want to, for instance, maybe you want a nice blurred water shot of a waterfall or a stream, and you want to get that slow shutter speed, maybe a couple seconds long or something, to get that nice flowing water shot, you know? Well, then you have to go off of automatic, and you might have to put a neutral density filter on. So you need to know these things in order to be a better photographer. Secondly, develop your eye. Develop your way of seeing things. Learn good composition, but always be ready to break the rules sometimes. You know, I know probably most of you in the room probably know the rule of thirds. You know, you never put something right in the center of your picture or your frame, because that's kind of stagnant composition. Well, I have some things that I want to be right in the center, even though it violates all the rules of composition or good composition. Somebody else told me one time, actually my old partner in the studio, in the stores that we had, he loved to shoot into the sun. And I picked that up from him. And ever since we've been associated, and I have no idea where he even is now, but I shoot right into the sun. I love backlighting. I love to shoot into the sun. Sometimes it causes crazy flares. Sometimes you never know what you're going to get. But I just love to shoot into the sun. And so that kind of violates some of the rules of good composition. I say, you know, the sun has to be in a certain place and shouldn't shoot into the sun. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. I think they're good problems. So know the rules of good composition, but be ready to break the rules sometimes. Portraiture, you know, sometimes they talk about the C curve as masculine, you know, when you have somebody that's, you know, a good rugged guy, you know, or something like that, you know, and he wants to, like, you do the C curve, or feminine is like the S curve, you know. But I think those rules ought to be broken all the time. But know what they are so that you know when to break the rules. I think that's a good way to go. So you're learning to see in pictures. And I sometimes drive my wife and sometimes my kids crazy, or sometimes people that I'm working with crazy, because I stop so many times during the course of a day. Photography is not what I do for my living anymore, although it's what I do for my passion. So I frequently will take pictures all week long, and I'm on the way to somewhere else, or I'm working on a job. The one picture that I have over on the far side was right in front of somebody's house I was working on. And it was just, it's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. I had to stop and take pictures and do what you do. Third thing I want to mention is that fill your frame and compose your picture in the frame. When you're doing the art of photography, think about you're working with a blank canvas, okay? An artist deliberately puts, or a painter puts everything on the canvas that he wants to be there. There's nothing that he doesn't want to be there that's there. He wants everything to be there. Photography for me is the same way. I fill the frame with everything I want to be there. Sometimes I'll even clean up the shot. Sometimes I don't. But sometimes I'll clean up the shot. If there's a beer can or something there, I'll go get rid of it and take it out. Sometimes if there's a bunch of brush or something, I'll just go and knock it down. I'll clear it out. I'll clean up the shot. But everything that's in my frame, I want to be there. When I first started taking pictures of, like, people, the people were always real small in my frame. And they looked terrible. I mean, it's just a terrible picture. And so I began to fill the frame. And when I went to India a few years ago, I did a bunch of portraiture where I just had the person's face, you know, and they have incredible faces in India, and incredible stories they can tell with their faces. And so I just filled the frame with their face, you know, just their, sometimes I couldn't even see the top of their head, just their face. But I learned that that's the most interesting way to picture people, or really to picture anything. Fill the frame, compose the shot. I do very little cropping after the fact, because I learned very early when I first started taking pictures and photographing that I filled the frame and I composed within the frame of my camera. And so I've always done that. And because I've always done that, I like full frame prints because I want everything that I framed and composed in that frame to be on the print. And so when you're shooting 35mm cameras and you get an 8x10 print, you're losing an inch on either end. It's getting cropped out. Unless you get an 8x12 or a 9x12. And then you get the whole frame, or almost the whole frame. So I like to do full frame printing. The point is to think about what you're doing. Pre-visualizing what the shot is going to look like. And when you're composing that, now if you do this a very long period of time or any length of time at all, you almost do it instinctively after a while. You do it habitually, you do it instinctively. So it's not like you're taking 5 minutes. I mean, half the time I take a picture, I jump out of the car and I take a picture and I'm back in the car within 30 seconds or a minute. Most of the time that's the way it goes for me. Sometimes I take longer than that. Sometimes if I'm really interested in the subject matter, I'll take multiple shots, I'll walk all around. I'm doing different things, but I'm thinking about whatever I'm doing. Learn to think about what you're doing and how you're composing the picture. What's going to look best and how it's going to fill the frame. And one thing for me, and going way back in my early days as a photographer and camera store owner, we had incredible access to equipment. My partner in crime was a gear junkie. He had so much gear. He wanted to get every new lens that came out. He wanted to get every new thing. We had medium format cameras. We had 35mm cameras. We had lenses at our discretion. We could actually, as a dealer, we could actually borrow lenses directly from Nikon. A lot of times, the camera companies would let us use stuff that was being carried around by their reps, and they would come to the store and they would say, here, use this for a little while. Here's the newest camera. I remember I got an F3 Nikon, which was titanium. It was an awesome camera. And he said, just use it for a little while. And then he just said, just keep it. And it was like an anniversary edition Nikon F. And so we had incredible access to gear. But it really isn't about the gear. Right now I have so little gear. I'd like to have a lot more, but I have so little gear. I have a couple of Olympus Pen 4/3 cameras. I have 5 lenses for those. And I have a Nikon 3100. And I have a few lenses, and I have a few old film camera lenses that I can use on that Nikon. And then I have 1 or 2 film cameras left. I have so little gear now. We used to have underwater cameras. We had exotic lenses. We had lenses that cost $10,000 at our use, and we could just use them anytime we wanted to, and we could try stuff out. But it really isn't about the gear. It's about developing your eye for seeing. When I was doing that independent study, the highest compliment I was ever paid in my college career was from my professor, and we were doing a critique, and I had to do a critique of my study that I'd worked on for a year with the whole class. And these were all these were other students that had been through the photography program, very good photographers. Some of them went on to work in New York and do great things. And the first image that went up we actually used to have our critiques. We would have our pictures mounted and matted, and then they would be on a light, like an easel stand. And everybody would go up and they would do this, they would look, and then they would back up, and then they would look again, and everybody would file by, and then they'd go back and sit down, and then they would just tear it apart. They would just talk about it, tear it apart. And it was good and bad. But I put my first image up, and my professor said, "You've got an eye." And it really spoke to me, because that's what I wanted to hear. That's what I needed to hear, that I had an eye for seeing. I had developed an eye for seeing photographically. Look at good photography. I have benefited so much. I think I've only been a member of the Guild. I think this is my 3rd year going. But I have benefited so much, and I've become a better photographer, even after all these years, by being a member of the Guild and looking at your work. I think of the memorable images. I know Wade has like tons of images from Sapphalo Island, and you know, I've admired those. And Cindy, you have like amazing images of people from India and Cuba and everywhere else you've been. And I admire that and I envy that. You know, you could go all over the place, all over the planet, and take all these amazing pictures, most of them with your iPhone, you know, which is incredible. I take a lot of pictures with my iPhone too. Like I said, I have 4,000 pictures on my iPhone right now, currently. Things that go back like years. I transferred them from one iPhone to another iPhone. So I benefited by looking at good photography. And I buy photography books. Many of them I get for a couple of bucks at a yard sale. But I buy photography books from photographers that I like and admire, and some that I even don't. Some of my earliest influences were Edward Weston, Ansel Adams, Dorothea Lange. Annie Leibovitz was a Rolling Stone photographer for years and years and years, has this incredible amount of pictures of celebrities and rock artists from way, way back, all the way up to even present day. A few years ago, she had an exhibit in Atlanta at the High Museum, yeah. And I went, it was amazing. I mean, stuff that would bring you to tears. You know, that's how emotionally it affected me some. But learn to look at good photography and think about what you like. And then go out and do that very same thing. It's okay to imitate people that you like. Some of my earliest successful and good photographs was because I copied somebody else directly. You know, we wanted to go out, my partner and I wanted to go out and do a moonrise over Mount Hood when we still lived in Oregon. And we had seen a photograph that was like a moonrise over Mount Hood. And we realized we did all the research. We had to get long telephoto lenses. We had to back way up. We wanted the moon to just be like huge in the picture. And we planned this thing for weeks, you know, and then we finally hit the right day, it was a full moon and everything. We went out there and we did the very thing that we had been looking at. And so it's okay. I mean, it's okay. If you want to imitate anything I've ever done, go for it. I think it's great. I think it's good to look at each other's photography and be inspired by it. You know, one of the goals that I really had in coming here and speaking tonight was that of inspiration, because I've been inspired by being a part of this guild, by being a part of this group. And, you know, so I hope that maybe you can be inspired by something you see or something you hear tonight. So look at other good photography and look at other photographers and look at their work and imitate their work even, people you admire. Another thing I used to do, and I know we do this in the guild quite a bit, I don't really have the opportunity to go too often, but go out with other shooters, go out with other photographers, do the photo walks and you know, talk about photography and look at each other's work and go out and shoot together. You can kind of feed off of each other's creativity. Go out and do what you're learning. Go out and practice what you're learning. Go out and do the shooting. You're gonna look at the books. Like I said, I buy books and you're welcome to look at everything up here. Also, I have some small photographs here, like 4x5, 4x6 photographs. You're welcome, just take them. Take them. They're 10 cents a piece, you know, so just take them. As many as you want. Kind of let them go around a little bit. But after you're done looking at photographer and hanging out with other good photographers and going on photo walks and going to places, I go places here in town that I have photographed literally a dozen times or more. And I keep going back because I keep looking for that perfect shot. And there's places that I've been back to time after time after time, different times a day, because I'm always thinking, what would this look like at 6:30 in the morning? What would this look like in a fog? What would this look like at sunset? One of the pictures that I want to get, and I'm working on this, is I want to get the moon rising over City Hall, the dome over City Hall. And I've been wanting to do this for weeks and weeks and weeks and kind of planning it. Every time the full moon comes around, I can't go, but I'm planning on it. I'm working on it. I'm going to get that shot, you know, because I'm thinking about it and I want to get that shot. But go out and do what you do. We have such an opportunity with digital, and I know so little about digital. I don't know RAW from JPEGs. I don't know even what, you know, you start talking about digital stuff. There's so much that I can learn from being a part of this group were people that have done digital photography way longer than I have. So I'm not anti-digital by any means. I'm not even anti-Photoshop or Luminar or Elements or Lightroom or whatever you might use. I don't own any of that stuff. I want to, but I don't own any of it. It doesn't prevent me from taking good photographs. And what I want to say is that once you go out and start shooting, you'll get better. You'll get better. The more you shoot, the better you'll get. The more you start looking at photography and talking about photography and planning your shots, you'll get better. We have such an opportunity because we don't have to worry about film cost or developing. Most of the printing I have done, 8x10s cost me less than $2. It's incredible. I just bought my own scanner, so I'm in the process of learning how to use the scanner. I'm going to start scanning all of my old medium format and 4x5 negatives and transparencies into digital so I can begin to print them. I've talked to Wade a little bit about getting my own printer so that it's even cheaper, but we have such an opportunity with digital that, it's just incredible. As we kind of close this, I'm going to go rapid fire through a bunch of images. I may talk about one or two, or if there's any questions maybe anybody has. This first image was here in Athens. That was a London taxi that was parked on Grady Street for months and months and months. It's no longer there, so it doesn't exist. I took this the other day. Everything was just kind of glowing that morning, and I pulled off to the side of the road. I actually went past it, had to go to a job appointment, and then I came back the same way because I saw this field, and it was just kind of glowing. I hoped that the light wouldn't change so much.
Mic,
Pardon me?
Can you talk into the mic, please?
Oh, okay, sorry. This is out in Watkinsville, and it's just it's supposed to be like a little country store, but I don't think it was. I think it's just somebody this is the Bear Creek Reservoir. One morning across from a house I was working on. I don't know what's the matter here. That's half of the image, but I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened there either. That's about half the image. This is an old church. It's abandoned on the way to, it's just outside of Crawfordville. And the doors are open, and this is what you find when you go inside. For some reason, these are all turned the wrong way. I'm only getting.
You're just taking the center.
Yeah, it looks like it's just a center.
Anyway, I love graffiti. Now we're going back to full image. I took this a couple of weeks ago. I was coming back from South Georgia, and there was 1 million frogs in this place. It was just incredibly loud. There was 1 million frogs, but the way the light was, and I hate the way that this just blows everything out on the screen. It's a much better photograph than it looks like. But this is a building at a crossroads in South Georgia somewhere, and I just like the way the sky and the. That's only half the image too, but that's the entrance to the 40 Watt Club. This is my front yard in the fog. I love fog. It diffuses the light, and this was the fall anyway, and everything was just kind of glowing.
Ben, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In a couple of your images, your colors are so rich, like the one in
Yeah.
the right there, but you don't manipulate.
I don't want to say that I don't manipulate because I have those Olympus pen cameras, the 4/3 cameras have 6 built-in filters. And I have one that I really like and I shoot with all the time. It's called the Pop Art filter, and it just punches up the colors. And so I shoot most of those with that. This is the cotton press. There's an old car, and I went out there in the fog at about 6 o'clock in the morning. It was still light. It must have been 7 o'clock or so. And all the windows were just kind of fogged up on this old Willys Jeep, and I don't know, I just liked it. This was Harris Shoals Park, and I shoot right into the sun sometimes, and I just like the way that it's real graphic lines and just light and shadow. Lady Liberty. This was years and years and years ago. when I was up there for my son's graduation. I don't even remember how long ago that was. I'd probably have to think about it. This is film. It's a much better image than it looks like up here, but this was film. This was a 6x7 medium format camera and a transparency out around Monument Park. This was a ghost town in Grafton, Utah, and while I was there photographing, I have some of these photographs, but there were two old men who were raking and working in front of some of these buildings. And they told me the whole story of the town. They had grown up in the town. They were like in their 80s, but they had grown up in this town. And they said that years and years ago, Hollywood came and used this town when they filmed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and they used this town. That's right outside of that town. I don't even remember where that was. It might be White Sands, New Mexico. This was another ghost town in California. I think it's
Bodie.
Bodie, yeah, it's Bodie. Somebody else has been there? Who was there? Who was in Bodie? Yeah, that's Bodie. That's right. There's our dome. I want to get the moon right there in that big blank space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
You can pick
This is South Beach in South Carolina, outside of Beaufort. Same. This is the Sheldon Church ruins, just outside of Beaufort. This has a great history. It was burned by the British in the Revolutionary War, and then reconstructed, rebuilt, and then it got burned again after the Civil War. Some people blamed it on Sherman. Actually, they came to find out it was freed slaves burned it, because the church was on the plantation. That's another South Beach. This is North Beach in that same place. Lucked out on this shot, have a good print of this. This was the remnants of Hurricane Harvey. I was going down the road and the sky was so incredible I had to stop. I stopped right in the middle of the road. I took this in the middle of the road, but there was nobody there, so. This is the Sheldon Church ruins. That's Mount St. Helens. I love graffiti. This was out west, and there's a lot of controversy about fracking. And this was all over. I found this on several buildings. This was in northern New Mexico. And I love graffiti. I just love this image. This did not make it into the Linden House, although I submitted it.
Yes.
Another one made it in. This one didn't. This was actually my favorite image, but this is that church that is abandoned. That's the church. That's what you see on the side of the road as you're going down the road. When I first saw that, I thought, and I've been back there 5 times now, I still haven't got what I'm looking for. But when I first saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I can't believe this. And when I walked up to the door just went open. And I looked around and I thought, this is kind of creepy. At the same time, it's very cool. And I don't think I have the image. Yeah, this is the image that they accepted in the Juried Art Show here currently. And that's that church. I think if you can read that, it was founded in 1860 something, I think. This is right off Pulaski Street in the fog, caboose, graffiti, love graffiti. The Historical Society used this print or one just like it on their... I used it. Yeah, did you use it? It's one just like it. I don't think it's this one, is it?
I thought it was.
Maybe it is this one, yeah. This is my shooting up shot, so you won't get that later. This is my looking up shot. This is the lighthouse on in South Carolina where I took all those other beach pictures. That's Greg Allman shortly before he passed away. I went to his last concert here in Athens. This was a hike that I did in southern New Mexico in a burned out area where we used to live. We used to live out here. And the fire had gone all through this. and burned up but it made for great photography. They reseeded it and planted it with this golden vegetation, and everything is just gold and black. And then in the distance is the Sacramento Mountains. And this is a historical lookout in that burn area. They actually cleaned all of these rocks by hand after, but I just love the way the trees look all black like that. I'm sorry that it burned and all that, but it just made for great photography. This is in southern Colorado. It is more graffiti, and I don't know why. Somebody said this is maybe a Banksy piece of graffiti. I don't know that it is or it isn't. We actually played around with this. I took a bunch of different pictures. This is my favorite one, I think, but I actually have a picture of my son who's dancing with a ballerina. He's got his hand up and he's, you know, anyway. This is not, that's about half of the picture, so I don't know what's going on. This is the other half. This is outside of Durango, Colorado. That's half the picture as well. This is one of those shots. This was in the Linden House last year in the Juried Art Show, and it was the only one I got in. But this was one of those pictures where I crossed a bridge. This is just by the Rio. This is in the Rio Grande, and I crossed the bridge, and I looked off to the side, and I saw all this red gold vegetation, almost looked like it was on fire, and these two trees, and it just looked like I mean I can't believe what I'm seeing. You know, so I got out, I pulled off, I got out of the car, I walked down there, I walked all around, and I took a bunch of different photographs there, but this was the most successful one that I came away with. This is my best friend in New Mexico. I kind of thought it looked like the Grim Reaper or something, but we were hiking up in this burn area, and I just said, hey, stop there a second, and I just took his picture. This is half the picture. This is I don't know what this is. This looks like, I don't know. It's half the picture. I've got the real picture over here. That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. This is a abandoned prison, penitentiary in eastern Pennsylvania. And it's called Eastern State Pen. And they built this in the 1700s. It's been abandoned since, I think, the 50s. It's absolutely, it's delightfully creepy. It's just, and they let you walk all through this. You can, I think you pay $10 or something, you can walk all through this and you can look in the cells, you can actually go in some of the cells. And it's absolutely fascinating. Al Capone was housed there for a little while. This was in that burn area. And it's just all that vegetation and burned trees. And this was another shot that we were actually coming down from the mountain. And I said, stop the car, stop the car. I wasn't driving, so I had to say, stop the car. And I had to get out and I had to take this picture because I saw this just going down the road at about 40 miles an hour. I saw this and I said, I've got to go back and do this. Those are the Rocky Steps in Philadelphia. Those are the steps that Sylvester Stallone ran up in Rocky.
Okay.
I've got another picture where I ran up the steps, but we won't do. This is that burn area. I did a lot of photography in that burn area. And this is here in Athens. When the ginkgo leaves fall to the ground. This is an abandoned house somewhere South Georgia. There's the Baptist church again. I think that's it. That's it. All right, well, thank you. Questions? Any thoughts or anything at all?
How did you get those trees green like that? A couple of photos back. You said you just pulled over on the side of the road. Yeah,
Those?
Get them green.
I didn't do anything to this photograph. It was probably with that pop art filter that's in my Olympus Pen cameras. And I mean, I love that filter. I shoot everything through that filter, and then if I don't like it, I take it off. But it's in camera. It just adds a little bit of punched up color to the image, but I didn't do anything else other than that. I sometimes play with exposure a little bit in the editing process, but I said I don't have any software right now. I just use what's in my computer. Any other questions?
Do you ever shoot film anymore? You say you still have a couple film cameras?
I have a film camera, and I have some film in my freezer. I have some medium format film that I'm giving to a friend right now. I have some Plus X, I have some Fujichrome, and some other 120 film that you can't get processed. I don't know what to do. I think there's...
Yeah, what process?
I don't think you can get... They don't process E6 anymore, do they?
You can get E6 processed just about anywhere. There's some
Really?
labs in Atlanta. You can even process it at home if you wanted to, although it's a little temperature sensitive.
Yeah.
The only process that's currently unavailable is the Kodachrome process.
Yeah.
The Kodachrome film never had dyes in it. It was really just like a 3-layer black and white film, and then the dyes were added to the process. It was really environmentally toxic.
You're Al, right?
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, if you haven't seen what Al's doing with the pinhole camera, I mean, it's fascinating. By the way, I just wanted to compliment you and commend you on that. That is amazing stuff. You know, that's
how I learned photography. I went through the,
yeah.
I went through the pinhole program.
You made me feel young again. You know, because that's the kind of stuff we used to do in college, you know, pinhole cameras and just fooling around. The Sheldon Church ruins?
Yeah, there was an artist that came to our class back in '88 when I was taking that class, and he used aged slide film and did light painting. He would go out and set up a 35mm camera and just open the shutter and go around those ruins painting with different colored lights. And this was back in the '80s when that was just a really hard thing. My
biggest problem when I was shooting, I only went there one time, and people were constantly coming in there and they were ruining my shots. So like I had to, you know, wait till they left, and because I don't, yeah, I don't have Photoshops.
That picture of the car, where was that taken?
The car. Oh, the London taxi?
Looks like Hancock.
That was on Grady Street.
And that house that was parked around there, a whole bunch of bug sculptures in the yard.
Yeah, that's exactly where it was.
That's where my cousin used to live.
Oh yeah. Something happened to the car.
My cousin used to live there before he moved.
I haven't seen the car there for about a year.
Yeah, my cousin bought that car. He started a London taxi thing.
Yeah.
And he made the bug sculptures.
That's really cool.
That's my cousin.
Yeah, I took a bunch of pictures of that car. I mean, I went back several times and did different pictures. This was spring, and it was a little bit foggy. It had just rained, and so this was kind of my favorite, but I have probably 50 pictures of that car. Anybody else? Well, thank you, and be happy to talk about anything up here. You're welcome, like I said, to sift through these 4x6 pictures, take a few of them home with you if you like. Don't take my books, don't take my pictures framed, don't take my iPhone, and don't take my newspaper articles. Those are in the archives, but thank you.